Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Die Wir Christenlut haben jetzt Freude, which translates to We Christian people have joy now. This is a pretty fascinating chorale. It kind of pushes tonal boundaries, actually, in terms of where the chords want to go, and it sort of challenges my pre-existing, definitions of chord progressions in certain cases. Bach had a very interesting relationship with tonality. I think it's a byproduct of the fact that he wrote largely contrapuntal music, and trying to get tonal harmony to work in a largely multi-melody texture can be difficult. Definitely not as easily discernible as other more homorhythmic styles that would emerge after Bach's time. But that being said, we should just hop into the analysis. Those were just a couple of early thoughts that I had about the chorale. So, forgot some fermatas here. I just wanted to mark them before I forgot. So, 2 flats in the key signature. I did see an addition with 1 flat in the key signature, but all of the E flats are written in manually when they were appropriate. So, I think we're in the key of G minor. We start on G minor, we end on G major. It's pretty clear that we're in the key of G minor throughout. We start off with the G minor triad over B flat. That's B flat, D, and G. And then we have passing tones in all of the voices, and we know that when there are passing tones in all of the voices, that's like an indicator that we should see if there's a subdivision of the the harmonic rhythm. And here we have A, C, F sharp, and C, which is F sharp diminished over A, and that's 7/6. And that makes sense in this context because it links G, D, G, and B flat, which is another tonic triad, this time in root position. It's a very common progression. 1, 2 tonics separated by a leading tone chord. We then have D, D, F sharp, and A. That's a root position D major triad, which is our 5, passing 7th in the tenor. And then we cadence very interestingly on E flat, B flat, G, and G. So this is a deceptive cadence, the textbook deceptive cadence, but we've seen some other forms of deceptive cadences in the past as well, but 5 going to 6 is the one that the textbook will tell you is the tried and true. Immediately afterwards, we have a perfect authentic cadence in G minor though, so this is just setting up some formal structure, some grammar. Here we have C, C, E flat, and G. That's a root position C minor triad, which is 4 in the key of G minor. And then we have an ascending chromatic bass line, C sharp, G, E, and B flat. That is C sharp fully diminished 7th, which is 7, 7 of 5, because C sharp's our leading tone in the key of D. And then we have D major afterwards, D, D, F sharp, and A. So the chord is going where we expect it to. And then, of course, we cadence on 1. So 7, 7 of 5 is just a substitute here for 2 or for 4 or for 6. It's just a predominant chord. All right, moving along, we have a half cadence in the key of G minor. We cadence on D, and we kind of know that it's a half cadence. I've been noticing this more when we have the 5th of the chord in the melody. It tends to be kind of a hallmark of the half cadence, so yeah. B flat, F, D, and B flat. We kind of get this pivot to the the relative major, 1 going to 3. Then we get some passing tones, and technically this spells an E flat major 7 chord over B flat, but I don't really think that's contributing to too much. Actually, you know what? I changed my mind about that. If we say that this is a passing 4/4/3 chord, not a 4/4/3 chord. What am I talking about? A 6/4/3 chord. A 6/4/3 chord. The chord afterwards is F major, so F, A, F, and C, which is a root position 7 chord. Some people call it 5 of 3, but I don't really think it applies here, because if this were 5 of 3, it would go to B flat. But the fact that the 7 chord is going to 1, G, B flat, D, and B flat, or G minor tonic triad, it would be like an example of a deceptive cadence in the key of B flat, but we're in the key of G, and 7 does go to 1. It is more of like an antiquated sound, but we do see it. Then we have some passing tones in the inner voices, and then we cadence on 5. D major, D, D, F sharp, and A, and that would be a half cadence. Then we have a pretty long phrase. We start off with G minor. We have a D major chord in between there. It's just a reiteration of the same chord we ended the phrase on, so I won't analyze it again. We have G, D, G, and B flat, which is a tonic triad in root position, passing 7th in the bass. E flat, G, and B flat. It's a root position E flat major triad, passing 7th in the bass. Then we have C, E flat, G, and C. That's a root position C minor triad, passing tone in the tenor. F, C, A, and C. That's a root position F major triad, which would be 7, or depending on how you look at it, 5 of 3. We have a passing tone in the bass. Then we have D, F, B flat, and D, which is a first inversion B flat major triad. That's 3-6, so that's going where we expect it to. Passing tone in the bass. Then we have B flat, G, B flat, and D, which is a first inversion G minor triad. 3 going to 1 is kind of unusual, but this section's very active in terms of its bass, so the upper voices are moving with regular harmonic rhythm, but the bass is kind of meandering around to connect the dots, but still 3 to 1 is kind of unusual. Passing tone in the bass. We then have G, E flat, A, and C. However, I think this G is our non-chord tone, and it's really F sharp, E flat, A, and C, which is 7 fully diminished 7th. But I don't know, depending on how you look at it, maybe this G is the chord tone and this is an A diminished over G, or A minor 7 flat 5 over G. So depending on how you look at it, I don't know. But I think it's more likely that this is a 7 chord, similar to how we had 1, 7, 1 here. We have 1, 7, 1 here as well, G, D, G, and B flat. We're getting ready for our next cadence. It's a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G minor. We have C, E flat, G, and A. That is 2 half diminished 6-5. Bach loves his 6-5 chords. Let me go ahead and make that a little bit more legible. Then we have D, D, F sharp, and A. It's a root position D major triad. 5 chords, so 2, 6, 5 going to 5 is a pretty common cadential formula. And then we cadence on 1, G minor. Alright, short phrase afterwards. It's only 4 beats in length. It's a half cadence in the key of G minor. We have another 1 going to 3, similar to the second phrase going to the third phrase. Notice how they're similar length as well. So this is a B flat major chord, root position. Then we have F, A, F, and C, which is a 7 chord. So here, instead of this passing 6, we just have 3 going to 7. So take this with a grain of salt. I don't really think Bach was implying anything. He was just linking the voicings that we had. We had a voicing here and a voicing here, and there were some skips, so he added some passing tones. And then we have G, G, D, and B flat, which is a tonic triad in root position, G minor, and then we cadence on 5. Notice how this half cadence also has the 5th of the chord in the melody as well. Not to say that that is an essential rule. There have been a handful of half cadences that haven't had it, but this is something that's still... A feels kind of like a tendency tone, that it wants to continue going down the scale. And that's kind of, I think, what... It's at least one of the contributing factors that leads to the chord being heard that way, or to the cadence being heard that way. And then next we have an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of F major. So we have kind of an unusual modulation. Actually, Bach does modulate from the key from a minor key to the key of the flat 7. They are adjacent to one another, and I did see some additions with 1 flat in the key signature, so who knows. I think this B flat chord here, which would be a 3 chord in the key of G minor, is a 4 chord in the key of F major. It's just B flat in root position, and then we immediately get E natural in the bass, which is indicative of the fact that we've moved somewhere. We have a secondary dominant, but seeing it for such a long time in the bass, I'm thinking that we've modulated. So we have E, B flat, G, and C. That is C7 over E, which is 5, 6, 5 in the key of F. Then we skip down to G, That doesn't really change the structure of the chord. It does get rid of the 7th, but I don't really think it matters too much, because really C as a dominant is being implied here. And then we have C, C, F, and B flat. So that F is a 4-3 suspension over the bass, or an accented non-chord tone, depending on how you look at it. But the chord just turns into root position 7 here, before we cadence on 1. And the reason why it's imperfect authentic is because the melody has A in it, as opposed to F. So he keeps the same melodic fragment, but recontextualizes it in the key of F, and that's pretty cool. Alright, so we're in the home stretch now. We end in a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G minor. And I think the modulation is pretty direct. We get this really interesting A major triad here, and it's just like a chain of 2 dominants to one another that has an interesting sound to it. But I think ultimately this whole idea is in the key of G minor. He just prolongs the scale going down any further by going back up and then going back down. So I think he does modulate via secondary dominant. This is just the way that I hear it. So this A major triad in root position is 5 of 5. Then we have D, D, F sharp, and B. So I said we had a chain of dominants. We have all of the makings of the D major chord in the bass. However, what ended up happening was we kept B flat, or we went up to B flat instead of keeping the A. And that B flat is very interesting because it changes the quality of this chord tremendously. It changes it from a 5 chord to a 3 augmented chord in first inversion. So here we are, we're seeing an augmented chord in the wild here, and this C kind of breaks it up a bit, this C natural, but still for this beat, this B flat over this F sharp creates a very unusual sound, that augmented 5th, or that diminished 4th sound, however you look at it. And then we get an ascending chromatic bass line from D up to G, kind of like what the melody is doing, but less staggered. This is much more direct. It just goes up from D to G chromatically. So then we have E flat, B, G, and B, or B flat. And this A is a passing tone. That's an E flat major triad in root position, so that would be a 6 chord. So it's going where we expect, 3 going to 6. Then we have E natural, G, G, and C. And this is where it's interesting because I don't typically see secondary dominants that tonicize the flat 7, but here we are in a real case where we see 5 of 7. And the only reason why he's able to tonicize 5 of 7 is because he's tonicizing F natural rather than F sharp. So really it takes an exceptional situation for us to see something like this. This isn't going to be like a regular part of his harmonic vocabulary. But ultimately the chord goes where we expect, F, F, A, and C. That is a 7 chord. Depending on how you hear it, it might be a 5 of 3, but I don't think that's how it's functioning in this case. I just thought I'd offer that analysis because a lot of textbooks will tell, well, I say a lot of textbooks. 2 of the textbooks that I've read will have flat out just said that flat 7 is kind of an anomaly, and you just never really see it in an accented context. And that's a greater survey of a lot of composers. So I think this sound sort of fell out of favor for a lot of composers as tonality codified more and more over time. But usually 7 is analyzed in some cases as 5 of 3 because that's where 7 typically wants to go. It either goes to 5 to 3 or to 1. But here it goes somewhere entirely different. It goes to F sharp, D, A, and D, which is D major over F sharp. It's a 5-6. We leap up to the 7th here in the alto before we go to G minor, G, D, B flat, and D. Root position, tonic triad. We have another passing tone in the alto. We then have E flat, G, G, and C. That's a first inversion C minor triad, which is 4-6. And then we have neighbor tone in the alto, passing tone in the tenor, F sharp, A, C, and E flat. We have a passing 7-7 chord here. More specifically, it's over an E flat in the bass, so that's 7-4-2. Before we go to a tonic triad, D, B flat, G, and B flat. It just happens to be in second inversion. It's interesting that we get it in second inversion because here this 1-6-4 chord It's more of a passing 1-6-4. It's not quite, it's very close to the proximity of the cadence, but it's not quite the cadence. But then we get C sharp, E, G, and A. So instead of going immediately to 5, which would be the cadential 6-4, we get 5-6-5 of 5 as a secondary dominant, similar to the way that we got 7-7 of 5 in the second phrase. We get a secondary dominant functioning as our predominant in the cadence. And then we have D, D, F sharp, and A. It's a 5-chord in root position, passing tone in the tenor, before we cadence on 1. And because this is a chorale in minor, Bach is most likely to cadence on a major tonic triad using the Picardy third. But all in all, this is a super fascinating chorale. We get augmented triad, we get tonicization of the 7, we get secondary dominance, we get some unusual progressions like 3 going to 7, kind of unusual progressions. I'd say less than usual, and a very interesting form. Short, short, long, short, short, long. Not really the pattern that we're used to, but Bach is at the liberty of the melody and sort of how it's phrased, so it's interesting. This was definitely an interesting chorale. I wasn't expecting such a short chorale to pack such an important punch. And also the fact that we got so much variation in the key of G minor as well. Like, we really only had this brief modulation to F. The only thing I'm a little unclear about is how to treat this modulation here. We get A going to D. Really, in the grand scheme of things, we're preparing for a return back to G minor because that's what the melody is preparing us to do. But we don't get it for a while, so I think we're in this like nebulous phrase here where we could have gone to the key of D minor, we could have gone anywhere else entirely, but as we're at the end of the chorale, really in the grand scheme of things we are in the key of G, which is why I analyzed it as a direct modulation. This just did not sound like we were going to tonicize D minor in the key of F. It just does not sound like F from that moment forward, and I think that's partially contributed to by the fact that it's the end of a phrase. So if this were to happen in the middle of the phrase, I think there would be an argument to be made that, you know, going to a D minor triad here or to a D major triad would be a logical maneuver harmonically, but that's not what we get. We get a brand new phrase, brand new idea. But keeping all of that in mind, I think I will end the video on that note. Thank you so much for watching the video, and thank you so much for supporting the channel. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis as well, and I hope you take care.